Hi, Robert.
Hi, Mushtak. Lovely to see you again.
A pleasure to see you. This is actually a very interesting project that we've been talking about for very long time. I think every time we meet over the past 10 years, we end up talking about so many things in life, in education, and leadership. And I think we have been always saying almost every time after we meet, or we should have recorded what we have talked about. And now probably we are getting into recording these conversations. How do you feel about that?
I can't believe that it has been 10 years of conversations, Mushtak, each and every one of which has been fascinating and involved diving down a different rabbit hole. So, first of all, thank you for a decade of great conversations. And secondly, even if we are the only audience for our conversations, I enjoy them. So, I'm delighted to see where they go.
Fantastic. And I'm actually likewise because I find chatting with you to be really uh, intriguing, but it also helps me to reflect on the ideas that I have and the decisions that I'm facing. And I really enjoyed your way of thinking and helping me frame my thoughts in a much clearer way. And probably these are things uh, that make these conversations valuable and enjoyable at the same time. And I totally agree with you, even if it just remains a record of our friendship and nobody else watches them, they're fine.
Yeah. So, in terms of your own language, I guess one of the things in my impact statement would be that I'm a framer. That's the thing that I think I do by natural default, or I'm interested in how we see problems and through which lens and what angle we look at, and therefore how the choices we make in framing make a big difference to what we do next.
You are absolutely right, and you talk about impact statements, and I'm sure in the future we'll touch on that. But I think this I am statement that you've mentioned is what I refer to as a superpower. And I really see the framing as a superpower of yours, because every time I ask you about something and you say, well, if you were to draw a 2 by 2, or if you were to think about it in that way, and it actually
Yeah.
really helps me see logic and um, see patterns through chaos. And I think that is very helpful. And of course, we as educators, probably part of our job, if we are good educators, and all the great educators also do that, they do help others frame things in a different way, because otherwise there's a huge onslaught of things happening in the world, in one's life, and it's without framing them, it's actually very difficult to deal with all of that.
So one of our conversation topics this morning was how did we get here? Where did we come from? And suppose if we reflect back to childhood, if you'd said to me as a child that you could pick a superpower, I probably would have picked leaping tall buildings in a single bound, or I wouldn't have picked framing, but I guess maybe your superpower picks you.
I actually think you are right. I think a superpower is something that picks you, because there are things within you, and I'm sure if we were to talk a little bit more, you will see a leaping tall building is not far away from framing, because in a way it's going up, seeing the bigger picture, and actually uh, avoiding the smaller details. Because if you are jumping from one high building to the other, you really need to focus on the most prominent features in the landscape. So it may not be as far away from what you thought. Yeah, I actually wanted to have these conversations to take maybe every time a 30 minutes or less or more. We see how it goes. But the first one, I wanted to know, uh, where did we come from? And I wanted to ask you, and I'm very happy to answer as well similar questions. Uh, where are you from? Where were you born? How was the world like when you were born?
So I have kind of come full circle, never really having left. So I work at a place called the University of the West of Scotland. And I would say, first of all, that I am Scottish and that I grew up in the west of Scotland. And I was born in a place called Helensburgh. and Helensburgh is where John Logie Baird, the inventor of television, lived. And so, growing up, that was the story that you heard about the place you were from, which is this is the place where television started. And if you think about that, that's amazing for a relatively small Scottish town to have changed the way in which we all interact. All of this technology that we're using today has its genesis in experiments many, many years ago to try and get moving pictures to transmit from one place to another.
Well, that's fascinating. So I was born in Baghdad, Iraq, and I spent my first 27 years there. Then I moved to Malaysia, where I spent my next 29 years. And I've been with another Scottish university, the place where both of us met, Harriet University, for the past 10 years. And it's
So here's a question for you, Mushtak. Does Malaysia have majority shareholder rights in you now that you've spent more time in Malaysia than you did in Iraq?
well, I actually think so, because from a material point of view, I presume every atom in my body now is sort of made in Malaysia, but also because I have a Malaysian wife and three Malaysian children, so I see my family as being 80% Malaysian. But again, it's very interesting that the organizations of these atoms are in Iraq, a place that I'm actually very, very proud to be associated with as well,
Yeah.
because just like the great work that Scotland has made, and I'm also equally proud of the impact that Scotland as a country has made on the world. I'm also proud of the culture and also the civilization, the Mesopotamian civilization that I was born into. So I think being able to live uh, in Mesopotamia, spend time in an amazing culture, which is Malaysia, but also being part of this global transnational education and being part of Harriet, which is a very special university indeed, and being able to associate with the Scottish culture, which I found generous and warm and welcoming, and be associated with a nation that is really so small in terms of size, but huge in terms of impact. You know, the Scottish Enlightenment, the Adam Smith work, the James Watt work, the invention of television, the discovery of antibiotics, you name it. So actually, there are so many things that are associated with Scotland from both philosophical and technological point of view. And I mean, both of us are engineers, although we may be doing different things now. And I think that association was something that and still is something that I'm very, very proud of.
Universities strike me as fascinating places because they are genuinely boundaryless international places by their nature, and they always have been. The ideas that get generated in them aren't Scottish ideas or Iraqi ideas or Malaysian ideas. They're just ideas that find their way out into the world. And so, don't want to be naive about it, but I think they are special places because of that. And yet, they have this character which is rooted in the place that they come from. And one of the things that I am proudest about Scotland is, and again, I don't want to be naive about it, but my favourite definition of Scottishness is people who live there and want to make their contribution there. And I feel that you, Mushtak, as an honorary Scot, although you don't live in Scotland, make a contribution in Scotland through your work at Heriot Watt, and that defines you as Scottish in some way, shape, or form.
And thank you very much, Robert. I still remember when I was selecting my kilt, and it's a bit of an investment, as you
Yeah.
imagine. And I was telling you, I wasn't very convinced of the Harriet Watt tartan because I felt it is not as stark and bold as I've seen other colors, and I thought, I was telling you, should I buy one of these generic tartan, maybe like a flower of Scotland or whatever? And I still remember you told me, look, if you want me to adopt you into the MacIntosh clan, I could do that, but you are not generic. So maybe the Harriet Watt tartan is what suits you. And that made it for me. That was a framing. That was a piece of framing that took just 1-2 minutes, and I say, yes, that's it. This is the tartan that I'm going to make my kilt. And indeed, I'm really very grateful for yourself and my many other Scottish friends who actually received me in a similar warmth, saying, you are an honorary Scot in that way, and I'm so proud of that. It's really a place that has so much going for it, I believe, and the world now maybe need it, like it needs Malaysia and other places even more. Places where people could meet, share a drink or a bit of food, and have a great conversation and build some trust at a time where we need that the most. And I think uh, universities as places, as you rightly said, they don't necessarily belong just to the place where they are, but they are also places where people from different uh, walks of life, they would come and they build connections and they build trust. And I think trust is such an important thing now.
So if you think about the relationship between nation states and universities, the Scottishness, my experience is that wherever you go in the world, if you're wearing a kilt, it starts a conversation. And wherever you go in the world, you bump into other people who've either come from Scotland or been to Scotland, and so they are boundaryless, these places. So what we would call the diaspora of a country find themselves all over the place. You will find the same with fellow Iraqis. Universities are like that. We call them alumni, don't we? So wherever
Exactly.
you go in the world, you'll find somebody who's a Heriot-Watt alumnus and will talk very fondly about their time at the university, whatever it was they were studying, some cases decades and decades and decades ago. But there's still that point of connection.
That's absolutely right. And I think this human connectedness is so important, and partly at the time when AI and technology is sort of promising to do so many things of the work that we used to associate with human beings. And the question is, so why do we need, or what do we need humans for? And I think at the end of the day is that connectivity is probably the thing that we all need to focus on, because through that we future proof humanity, we future proof ourselves, our children, our students, our colleagues, our communities. So you are absolutely right, Robert.
So think about the way in which innovation happens and new ideas come into being, whether it's John Logie Baird inventing the television or any other invention. AI allows you to do what I would call mechanistic and combinatorial innovation. You take a bazillion things and you match them up one by one with a bazillion other things, and one of them might turn out to be a combination that's interesting. There's a lot of drug discovery is done in that way. I take this compound and that compound and I shake them together and see what they do. And where a person doing that would take their entirety of their working life to work through a tenth of the available combinations, machines can do that much faster and more effectively than we can. And some interesting things come out of if I mix this colour with that colour, I hadn't seen that coming. But human to human interactions come from stories and perspectives and frames and unusual, unexpected combinations. And I don't think that AI will ever be able to replicate that human to human spontaneity, because it isn't just the randomness of 10,000 of these components mixed with 10,000 of those components gets you to some enormous number of potential combinations. Even strategists in your 2x2 matrices, 2x2s get you 4. But I think humans working with 2x2s and only 4 still come up with unexpected, unpredictable things.
So I agree with you, and I really hope that we continue to insist on defining certain things like maybe creativity as new things that have value, that are created by human beings, because I think we value things that are human, and I think that would probably require that we make the decision to do this. I was thinking the other day of entertainment. And I still remember a time where we have the normal television where they will show a movie at what time, and then you have to design your life around that, and then everybody would watch the same thing, and then the next day we talk about it. Now I could sit in front of Netflix spending half an hour just really finding something to watch. There's a million things to be watched there. And now AI is able potentially to produce very personalized kind of uh, entertainment, movies or series or whatever, that doesn't need human to act them. And I ask myself, would I be enjoying that the same, or the fact that there was a human behind this who put more effort into memorizing the lines and maybe repeating certain shots multiple times, and will that add value? And I hope it will still add value in from that uh, point of view. But I think all of that would require that we make a decision, just like we are still willing to pay more money for a tailor-made suit compared to someone we just take off the rack, because we just value that human connection, that uniqueness, including the uniqueness that happens because of flaws that comes into the product. So it's not all about just having things that flawless and ready and complete. And I think that would be something that will define us, I feel, for the next couple of years or decade as technology gets better and better.
So there are some brilliant businesses out there that operate in the space that you're describing. So the relationship between cheapness and convenience and speed and craft and, you know, nuance and person specification. So there's a brilliant Danish business that makes custom fit clothing, but it uses an AI algorithm that asks you some questions about your age and your weight and your height and your body shape, and then it makes a prediction as to what will fit you. And so it can do that at a fraction of the cost of a tailor-made outfit.
Mm,
But they have a money back guarantee, which is, if we send you it and it doesn't quite fit, we'll make you a fresh one. But then once you've captured that, you can then go back and order your t-shirts or whatever custom made. And they're still made by a person. The thing I really like about them as a brand is that you get a t-shirt through the post with a little handwritten note on it saying this t-shirt was made by Mushtak in Portugal. And so there's still a person at the back of it. But I would never have had the capacity to buy that product
mm.
through a business in Denmark, manufactured in Portugal, with responsible use of materials and so on, and have it shipped to my home. And it's just brilliant. And so I do think that there are ways these are not in competition, the
Mm.
capacity of technology to do things differently and the capacity of humans to do things creatively in the way that we have always done. They don't have to be in competition.
Well, that's a very powerful idea, and I still believe we need people to help us frame them, because you see, we when people think of the future of work currently, people only, I think, see more competition rather than combination when it comes to technology. And it's because uh, people are using the technology wrongly. So if we reflect on our life as academics, many academics are worried about the use of AI, for example, for cheating. And of course, if the way things are framed for the students, that you need to produce the best piece of work so that you get the highest mark, then the normal thing, people will find ways around that. And maybe that would lead them into using AI to produce something and submit it in their names. But if the whole experience is framed around learning, and you are measured by your learning rather than you are measured by passing the exam or submitting the
Yes.
best report. So I think that would probably create that combination that you're talking about.
So earlier I said that universities are amazing places, partly because they've been around for so long. And one of our disadvantages as amazing places is that we have centuries of accumulated habits about how we do things. And so if you look at the way in which we still teach, by and large, the experts like you and I turn up in front of a bank of students who sit in a lecture theatre, a bit like an amphitheatre or a stadium, and they listen and they take notes, and then a few weeks or months later, they come back to a different shape of room, usually a flat room, and they sit at an individual desk with a piece of paper, and they get 1 or 2 hours in which they have to write down all the wisdom they've accumulated, and then you and I will check it and say, well, she got that wrong. He remembered this. Oh, that's wrong. And then you get a mark. And I think that that sense of transmitting knowledge and then testing the extent to which you can reproduce that knowledge live in the moment is centuries old. But it doesn't really reflect the fact that that's not how we live our lives anymore. How we live our lives is that you'd look on your device and be able to say, oh, I don't need to remember this. The device remembers this for me. What's really interesting then is, do I understand what to do with this, and what did I do with it? What did I learn from that?
This is very, very powerful thought, and you're right. And I think as we speak, we talked about few things that could help us future conversations. But before we do that, I wanted to go back and to the childhood, and I asked you, did you have a dream job? When you were 10 or 14 or even younger, what did you dream of being when you grow up?
So Scottish people, by and large, dream of being professional footballers. That's so that I would have loved that. Unfortunately, my enthusiasm for the sport is not matched by my ability for the sport. Um, and the second thing the kind of aspiration that I really had as a young child, I can remember reading books, but that was such a luxury. We had a library in the village that I grew up in, and it was just this little gateway into a completely different world. And I absolutely loved it. And I can remember, in retrospect now, I think I was reading books that were quite interesting choices for a relatively young child. But I then got this idea that, of course, books were written by people. And I've got quite a powerful memory of buying a blank notebook and beginning to try and write a book and getting stuck, like at the second or third paragraph, and thinking, wow, how do you produce hundreds of pages of this complicated idea? And of course, when you read children's stories at primary school, as we would call it in Scotland, they are mostly Mushtak had an apple and he went to school and ate the apple and then came home. They're not very interesting, and structurally, they're not very interesting. So not many children, I would suggest, want to read stories written by other children.
Mhm.
And I can remember quite clearly having this secretive thing that I wanted to write a book, and then trying to write it and thinking, my goodness, rubbish compared to the books that I read. And thinking, oh, well, so maybe that's just not in my future. And I discovered also that football wasn't in my future. I was never going to play for my beloved Aberdeen or Scotland. But as I grew up and went off and studied and went to university, and I actually now reflect, I spent quite a lot of my time writing things of different types, academic papers, papers for management meetings, business cases, and books, actually. And so that was my dream. And so a bit like the superpower conversation, maybe it's that I will leap tall buildings in a single bound, not through the powers of a kind of superhero, but just through the way in which you do your work. And so I found myself amazed to some extent that I've managed to write books.
So that's really fascinating, and interestingly, Scotland made it to the World Cup, which is
Yeah, we've been boycotting it for many years, Mushtak, but we've decided to go back.
which is fantastic. Yeah, I'm very happy to have that. And interestingly, Robert, Iraq also made it for the first time in 40 years, and just they qualified just.
Maybe we will meet in the final.
You will never know, right? We have to be very optimistic, but you will never know. Yeah. So that's really amazing. Actually, if you were to ask me when I was a child, what would I like to be? I always wanted to be an astronaut, and I was really fascinated by Star Trek. As a matter of fact, I still remember a time when I was probably 9 or 10, when there was, I think, a Soviet satellite that was entering the atmosphere. So there was a, a sort of an situation that was declared in the world that they were not sure where will it fall. And I was like everybody said, the government was saying, please stay indoor, secretly hoping and praying that it falls near my place so that I could maybe take some electronics from it. So I was quite fascinated by technology. And yeah, I interestingly also I also loved books, and books of any way, shape, or form. I still remember when it's time for the school to release the results. And I used to do very well at my school. And my father used to call and he says, how was it? So I said, yeah, I was the top of the class. Then he said, what would you like me to buy you? And I just say books. I mean, I don't say what kind of books, just books. And of course, sometimes I go with him to the bookstore, and I just buy books. And I'm in primary school, and I still remember one of the books that I decided to buy was Einstein and the theory of relativity. So I'm reading and I don't understand anything. And back then, there's no internet. Even the library, as you rightly said, you need to go to the school, or to be able to access it. So to me, as at the age of 7 or 8 or 9, every adult to me is like an encyclopedia. I go to them and I ask them about things. So one of our relatives who goes to university, and to me, like, wow, this guy goes to university. He comes and I say, can you explain this to me? And he said, what is this? I said, it's about Einstein and the theory of relativity. He said, I hear people at the university level, they are unable to understand this. So I think you just leave it. I said, can you just like try to read it with me? He said, I'm not doing that. And I'm like so disappointed. You are an adult. You are like a big person, and you can't even have this conversation with me. So these were really my conversations that I had back then.
Actually, the part of the world, so the Helensburgh, where I grew up, there was a little bookshop. And once every week or two, when we went from the village I lived in to the local town, which was Helensburgh, you could get to go in. And I regarded it a bit unfairly, I suspect. I regarded it as a bit like the library, because I had no money to buy the books, but I could go in and look at the books. And if you're very careful, you could open the first few pages without breaking the spine of the book and read the first few pages of a book. And then do that just long enough that you didn't get chased out of the shop by the owner who was fed up that someone was not buying any products from them. But that that connects back to, I think you said earlier, which is that's a bit like Netflix, like an
Mm.
entire shop full of things that you could imagine you could eventually read all of if you could just afford it. And you get the little 30-second trailer for some movie or TV series that scrolling past them. And I just absolutely loved that. And I loved that in a way which I don't love the equivalent in Netflix or Amazon Prime or Apple TV, because I get so frustrated thinking, I just want to watch something. And I've spent all the time that I had to watch something trying to choose something. It's an odd juxtaposition of the difference between that and the physical bookshop as a small boy versus the digital landscape as an adult.
Well, this is fascinating, and we said these conversations we'll try to keep them at like a 30 minutes kind of
Yeah.
way.
It's
So
a tough
probably
discipline for us.
yes, absolutely, yes. That requires a lot of discipline, but it's really fantastic that we can have them and we can record them and we can reflect on them. And when we were talking about producing this, we said we try to end our conversation with uh, either a question about what should we talk about later, or in the following episode, or even should we invite someone to the next episode. I personally think we are not yet ready to invite someone. I think we have so many things that we need to just enjoy between us. We talked about the books that we wanted to write and the books we read. We talked about schooling. So what do you think we should talk about next?
I think we should talk about which early educational experience was most formative for you or most surprising.
Okay. So let's
Because
let's do that.
we both ended up in academia.
Yeah,
spending our career mostly educating other people.
that's right.
So it'd be interesting to think, how did you end up doing that?
I think that's a very good idea to start our conversation for the next episode and see where it takes us.
Yeah, brilliant. How lovely to see you, Mushtak. Thank you for setting this up.
Very much. Thank you.
I'm off to a set of graduation ceremonies to celebrate the educational achievements of others. Um, and I hope you have a great evening in Malaysia.
Same to you. Thank you very much.